You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Canon Fodder. Here are your hosts, Brian Cameron, Matt Booker, and Mark Newbold.
Grab your bookmarks, it's time to take cover as we unleash the Canon Fodder over the Star Wars galaxy of literature. Canon Fodder is the home of Fantha Tracks Radio for everything Star Wars literature, from comics, books, magazines, partworks, and everything else that comprises the expanded universe of Star Wars. Joining me, Brian Cameron, this month is Mark Newbold.
Hello.
Matt Booker.
Hello there.
And Mark Mulcaster.
Oh, you've nicked both of the really good intros. How are you doing?
How are you doing?
How has this past month been since we last spoke?
Busy. Lots going on. It seems to be loads of Star Wars news. We've just recorded and making tracks, and we didn't get through all the plot points and stuff we were going to talk about. We just ended up going off into the weeds about all the news this week. So yeah, nice and busy. Site's ticking over, so all good.
Yeah, news is actually starting to rock again. Product is coming out. We've got HasCon this weekend coming, I think, even though stuff that they should be announcing is already leaking because it's hitting shelves in places. So yeah, news is back to a steady flow again.
I'm good. I'm enjoying all the lovely output you guys are putting out on Fantha Tracks. So well done, you guys.
Well done, us indeed. I've had very little output on the site this past month, but I've been on holiday and had a little trip. A staycation type holidays now is the fashion in a COVID world. Anyway, on this month's show, the big news we will be discussing is the newly released Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising, the latest reveals for the upcoming The High Republic, before we get stuck into a review of the ongoing Vader comic. So, with all that in mind, let's get stuck in and chew over the latest fodder. Lucasfilm have launched the High Republic area, a section on StarWars.com, and alongside the launch of this new section, they also revealed that the High Republic will feature a 700-year-old Yoda. What do you think, guys, of introducing Yoda into the High Republic? Do you feel this is an obvious move? Do you think it's a good move?
It feels like an obvious move. Given his longevity, 900 years old and all that sort of stuff, that this is 200 years before, before A New Hope. But the images of him are a bit, when you saw the Phantom Menace version of Yoda, and he sort of went, really? Why would he look that different? And this is a little bit the same. It looks a little bit. I mean, it's early versions, and I don't suppose it's what it'll finally look like. But I'm kind of pleased he's in there. But I still think the way they sort of lay him out as being, he's not in the same sort of role, which I don't suppose he would be. But yeah, I'm glad he's there. Yeah, anything with the name Yoda in it at the moment seems to be working for Lucasfilm, so you might as well chuck, middle-aged Yoda in along with Baby Yoda. Makes sense.
It looks like it's been to the Gap, doesn't it? And just bought the latest khaki outfit. I want to see younger Yoda in like a flamboyant shirt or something, or a Hawaiian shirt Yoda, or something different other than Yoda in some shade of khaki.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think you're right. I mean, it was pretty obvious, I think, when they set it only 200 years before the events of Phantom Menace that he was probably going to be in it to some capacity. This kind of feels like this is a way to kind of just keep everything ticking over on the news front. I mean, it's a fairly easy kind of thing to just kind of publish and just kind of say, oh, well, he's going to be in it. So, but yeah, it's interesting because, like, when you look at it, you got the child or Baby Yoda who's 50, And then you've got Yoda, who's kind of like 700, but you kind of think that, would he be that much younger than what he actually does generally look like? I mean, I don't know. It's like their species seems to age in a really bizarre kind of way. You know, to get to 50 and still be the equivalency of like an 18-month-old, baby, and then get to 700 and kind of, I don't know. Who knows? But it'd be interesting to see what they do with him, I guess, and and maybe would be quite a nice kind of like opportunity to see Yoda have some kind of like lesson that he himself has to learn, because obviously he's very much, by the time we meet him in Phantom Menace, he's got all the experience and he seems to have been everywhere and done everything. But it would be good for him to kind of maybe have to kind of like have a lesson or two kind of like learn along the way.
I was kind of disappointed that they've introduced him to the series. I kind of felt it's an obvious way to go, but with so much of the way they've talked about the High Republic so far, I was hoping for a completely clean slate and not have too much of this links to whether it's the prequels or the original trilogy and so on.
Well, I thought when they said they were doing it was all new and all nothing you'd ever seen before.
Yeah, that's kind of where my thought place came from. I also have this issue with him not being on the Jedi High Council if you're going to have him at all in the series, because it basically makes it appear as if the Jedi High Council is only going to elect geriatric pensioners, and what kind of country would do that? Controversial. But I didn't like the design. I agree he looked far too young for a 200-year-old difference when you bring in the factor in the child at 50 years old. So it looked kind of odd, and I just think it's going to
classic.
Yeah, I just think it's going to distract from really elevating all these new characters to a high level by having Yoda, because how can you not make him prominent if you're going to have him in your storyline? I just don't see how a cameo Yoda is going to work without distracting from the rest of the tale. But
that's, I think, kind of actually that's what they kind of almost needed to do in some respects. I mean, I know, shame on me for this kind of comparison, but you look at the kind of cameos they did way back in Star Trek The Next Generation when they had like McCoy and Scotty and Matt on an episode. It is kind of like a glorified cameo, which just kind of just acts as just like a touchstone to, I guess, what we know. But yeah, I mean, it is odd because I think it would, because of the time period, if he wasn't featured in it, it would almost be a little bit too conspicuous, like they're maybe trying to kind of avoid using him, for instance.
Yeah, I can get that. In terms of the design and look of him, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they've said Ian McKay's involved, and McKay's an expert, isn't he? He designed Darth Maul and the Sith Witches and all sorts of stuff for the prequel trilogy. So he's kind of the man from that era. But the images they shared, well, one was basically just a redraw of that Attack of the Clones pose when he's fighting Dooku.
Yeah,
with the lightning and stuff. But the just the general look of him just didn't look quite right. And I just think, why change it? It's Yoda. Stuart Freeborn and Macquarie and that team did such a great job of nailing. You look at a photo of Freeborn, a photo of Einstein, you've got Yoda. Basically, it's just perfect for the character in Empire. And then Jedi, he's a little bit older, obviously, because he's dying. So obviously there's a tweak there. And then Phantom Menace, they completely change it. The CG Yoda was fine for what it was. It was this obviously Yoda, so that's okay.
Boggling Yoda.
Yeah. And now they go and change it again. Like Brian just said, why would he look that different? It's only 200 years. And again, if you're going to have Yoda in this, stick him in the big seat. I can't imagine that he's only been in the chair that a relatively short amount of time. He doesn't have to be out doing the missions. Another Star Trek analogy: early season Captain Picard sent everybody else away on the away missions. Maybe Yoda at this time period is focused on the council and sitting on the council, and he's sending all these others out to get experience. He doesn't have to be the action guy out there doing it. I don't know. It'll be. I mean, it sounds like I'm criticising it before we've read sort of line one, but it just seemed a bit odd.
Yeah. No,
When was it initially meant to come out then? Was it meant to be out by now, High Republic?
It was supposed to launch Celebration Week.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would be fine if actually this, over the course of this series, this is basically his transition from Jedi Knight to Jedi Master, or Jedi Master to Grand Master of the Jedi Council, something like that. That there's actually a clear kind of path that he's actually on, rather than him just kind of like popping up now and again with a little bit of advice for the young upstarts.
We also saw from the High Republic an excerpt from A Test of Courage, Justina Ireland's middle grade book for the series, and this excerpt featured Avon Staros and Vernestra. Did anyone check out this first chance to read a little bit from A Test of Courage, and what do you think of the first taste of the new characters?
It has possibly one of the least Star Wars names I've ever seen in a book, if I'm honest. So,
which was
Master Douglas Sunvale. I mean,
what
who in Star Wars gets called Douglas? That's my takeaway. I mean, yeah, the rest of it was all right. I think it kind of like it seemed written in an appropriate style and manner for the kind of like YA kind of age group that it's aimed at. It looks like it'll be quite a fun kind of little story to read.
Also from the High Republic, we saw the first pages of the upcoming Marvel comic written by Cavan Scott, published on StarWars.com. I'm guessing we all jumped straight in and had a look to see what was going to come from the new comic with this early preview. Everyone's thoughts?
Too early.
Yeah.
Too early to promote something that, as a comic shop retailer, customers can't even order yet. You promote stuff like that when it's solicited and comic retailers can order it and people can put out subscriptions of comics. What's the point of chatting about something even earlier than that? I don't get. Was it just sat in the wings and it's a slow news week or something? I don't know.
You could have released this news round about New York Comic Con time, I guess.
Yeah.
When you're either have solicited it or just off to solicit for it, and create the buzz then.
Well, I think they're doing a New York Comic Con publishing panel, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
so,
that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point, that Matt. Because like you say, they are doing that online panel, which is great that they're doing it. They announced it this week, and I think Christian
right at the bottom of the list, wasn't it? Right at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
weird.
We don't know what day or time or anything yet. That will follow, obviously. But yeah, it does feel like that's usually the time you would get. We've been to plenty, haven't we, Matt? So it's sort of the time you'd get to these things. And like I say, if it's not listed yet, I think it's coming out in January. I think I've read somewhere that it is coming out in January. But again, it just seems, and also black and white. But if you look at the first image, they've started to colour the first panel, so it feels very, I wouldn't say rushed. That's not fair, but it just seemed a bit of an odd decision. And the artwork is beautiful. Of course, it'll look completely different when it's coloured. And I do like black and white art. Me and Mark were talking about this on a podcast recently about black and white art, and it's nice and crisp. You've got a good inker, and this is beautifully inked. It looks fantastic. It did kind of almost look more like an IDW comic. It had that sort of almost whimsical look about it, which I kind of liked. It seemed a bit odd for a Marvel issue, but again, once it's coloured and all the trimmings are added, it'll look exactly as it should. But I'm interested. I'm interested in the whole High Republic program. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it. But yeah, you're right, Matt. I think it's a bit early.
And it's the way Hasbro at the moment aren't announcing anything, and they've brought the release schedules of product and announcements of product much closer together, which makes more sense. Here, this is what you can buy soon. Pre-order it now. You'll have it in a month, and they've cut down the secrecy time. They've extended the secrecy time on stuff, but then things are leaking. But I like the way Hasbro are doing it. They're announcing stuff, and then you can buy it and have it in your hands in a couple of weeks later.
Yeah.
Because it used to be the fact that you were like a year out when they announced stuff. Oh, we're doing this. Okay. Then you could buy it in a year. Well, by the time it comes around to it being bought, I don't really care because the internet buzz has gone on it.
Yeah.
So I get it. And then with the comics, we've gone the other way and further out. Like announcing we're doing High Republic comics, fine. because we're doing this whole era and we're doing this whole thing, and yeah, you're going to do a comic, you're doing an audio book, you're doing a novel, you're doing a book about it, and you're doing a cross-sections book and all the rest of it, which is great. But actual content, you shouldn't announce until it's at least pre-orderable.
But we talked about this, me and Mark talked about this on Making Tracks last episode. We said, would Lucasfilm or could Lucasfilm do a DC fandom type, show, if you like?
Yeah.
And how difficult it is that obviously they've had Celebration where all this stuff would have been spunked out over that sort of weekend, and they've lost that. So they've got to sort of claw back some sort of marketing program for everything, because you would have got all of the squadrons, and like you say, High Republic would have been out just before the show, and all the other stuff, and Mando announcements. They've got to now sort of piecemeal dropping out across all their other platforms, and so I think it's kind of sending, not a tailspin, that's not fair, but it's obviously giving them a lot to think about how they're going to promote it.
What's your thoughts on the art from the comic? Obviously, it's by Ario Arandito and Mark Morales.
It's nice looking art. I do like the art. Like I say, it's got a, as I said, whimsical. That maybe makes it sound a bit too sort of elf questy, but it's got that about it, and that creature that's in it. That in the write-up, sort of they explain that he was taken from another story, and that they wanted to work him in. I think Kevin Scott wanted to work him in, which is cool, because all those little link-ups. I think that's really sort of his bread and butter, isn't it? He likes all these little links and hookups. It looked nice, but again, it's difficult to quantify until it's coloured. The colouring these days, more than ever, makes such a difference. Yeah. But it does look nice, yeah.
The characters look good. I didn't like the little fairy thing.
It kind of looked like Bobby Frick with wings.
Yeah.
So, but also, yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like, to some degree, it was unfinished because it should have been coloured, and so I'm not quite sure why they felt the need to kind of push it out without it being coloured.
I thought the panels were a little bit busy, and I think part of that is because it hasn't been coloured. I think they colour it and you kind of tone it down ever so slightly, where the pencils were very, very busy. But yeah, I have to agree. I don't understand the rush to get this in front of people. I could understand from the point of view, maybe their target originally was Celebration, but when everything changed, I would have kept it until the November cycle, and pushed it out there when you can get the people placing orders at their comic shop hyped for the comic. I want that. I'm going to tell my comic shop, order me that. Would have seemed more logical.
And your comic shop's like, I don't know what you want about, because I've never seen it in previews. It's not in the order cycle yet.
And I didn't realise there's a Trandoshan Jedi Master in this panel, and I didn't realise that how much a Trandoshan's eyes look like an evil Kermit the Frog. It's one panel that's just really freaky.
Oh, the bottom of the first panel?
Yeah.
Yeah, first page, bottom, yeah.
Star Wars Reads Day returns for 2020, and its 9th year. Star Wars Read Day is back October 1st. You can head over to starwars.com, where you can download all sorts of wonderful posters and activity stuff for kids, get involved in what's happening in your local communities and libraries, and all sorts of other exciting stuff. Using the hashtag Star Wars Reads, share what you're up to on the 1st of October. My friends over at CBSI Global Comic Safari have got a new YouTube series out looking at Star Wars Issue 1 variants, all of the foreign covers from all around the world in more detail than you can possibly ever imagine. I'm a collector of weird and wonderful vintage foreign Star Wars, so I've enjoyed the show. But guys, when you look back at the initial Marvel comic run and you consider the art of Chaykin, and how outspoken he's been about how much he disliked it, what do you think? Do you think it's as bad as he feels it was? Or do you just feel it blew up so much and so unexpectedly that perhaps it's just a case he wished he spent more time at it?
He was boxing the corner, really, wasn't he? Because he only had a handful of those black and whites from 20th Century Fox to base a lot of his stuff on. So he wasn't working like a modern comic, like a Phil Noto who's got everything at hand to do his amazing work and do the likenesses that he does. Any modern artist can do that, but Chaykin was really massively in the dark. So, and I think because that was such like first million selling comic since the war, and all the records it broke back in the day. It's so indelibly linked to that early era of Star Wars. I think as a fan, it's hard to pull the two apart. But when you obviously stack up, let's say, Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson's Empire Strikes Back adaptation next to the Star Wars one, in terms of visual quality, it's hard to compare. But then by the same token, some of the frames in the Chaikin artwork are brilliant, and I far prefer the original Chaikin to the Dark Horse redo that they did all those years later. So yeah, it's difficult. I get why he says that, an artist of his caliber, and he was turning it around in no time, I guess, but he was massively handcuffed, so it's hard to criticize.
Yeah, it's a piece of its time, and what was happening then is like, here's this, right, do it now, it's out next month. And back then they were just cranking books out left, right and centre, and it's just one of those ones that was just cranked out and he didn't know how big it was going to be. Every artist would love to go back and revisit some of their work and do better work on it with the better resources. If he'd have been able to watch the film, he could have done it better, but I don't think he had he?
No.
They hadn't had the resources. You can only do so much on a handful of images and stuff. So I think it's a superb piece of work for what it is when you know the full story.
Insight Edition's Star Wars The Lightsaber Collection is coming out 20th of October. Over on fathertracks.com, we got the exclusive look at Canon Jarrus's lightsaber, which was very cool to see for the first time. We've also had a look at Leo Garner's saber as well this past month. Mr. Malcaster, you're a cosplayer of high regard. Is this the kind of book?
Regard?
Yeah, is this the kind of book that interests you? A detailed, very, very, very detailed look at props like lightsabers that quite often we only see glimpses of on screen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that can give us, greater insight to the props, and also, especially for lightsabers and stuff that we may not have actually seen like a visual representation of before, is always interesting to see. So, plus, of course, if there's any interesting kind of background information or kind of like, curious kind of facts, that's always great. This is kind of like one of those books which is definitely up my street.
What does everyone else think? Because I've kind of been critical of this book in the past, because I hate like really specific non-fiction books. I always have this feeling they're kind of trying to milk it a little bit.
I've got a feeling it's inspired by the Harry Potter Wands book.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And
totally.
there seems to be like a really huge buzz online about this book, and it's something I just don't get. So what do you guys think?
I think a book of lightsabers is better than a book of sticks.
I get it. I mean, like me and Mark had talked about it before, and I think for costumers and such, it's going to be absolutely essential in that respect, to get a closer look at the weapons. But there's with Star Wars, there's people who are into ships, people who are into weapons, lightsaber, all elements. There's people who've got a specific weird foreign versions of issue 1 of Star Wars. There's a little nook and cranny for everyone, isn't there? So, and this, I think, the idea of this book is that they really go, you're down to the rivets of the sabers in this book. You're really looking at it in great detail. So I can see why. And also, some of these weapons, we've never had a particularly good look. And I think, we had the Kanan spread, which we were really pleased to be able to put on Fantha. And, it's definitely the most detailed and sort of real universe type look, as opposed to an animated look at the weapon. So, yeah, I can see why there's an I'm certainly looking forward to having a read through it.
Is it just artwork of the sabers then, or have they actually gone and built all the sabers and shown them 360?
It's like a CG representation by the looks of things. At least with the Kanan one. I mean, I don't know. I suppose maybe. I mean, I don't know if you had the option to put in the actual props for the lightsabers you've got. Would you do that, or would that be a bit jarring compared, for the overall aesthetic of the book? I don't know. But yeah, it seems to be like one view. Or at least if you look at the Kanan panels that we've got on the site, it's right up on one page, and then it's a lightsaber on the other. But it is only one view, so you don't even get both sides, and actually that's the little frustrating thing is sometimes, like, even with a Luke Skywalker Graphics, you've got activator switch on one side and you've got other stuff on the other side, so you kind of almost need a 360 representation of some of these to kind of get the full kind of gist of actually what the lightsaber's about.
Something a little bit different now, but James Caan, the author of the Return of the Jedi adaptation, as well as Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, is doing a concert on Saturday the 19th September, performing songs from his 3 albums and telling stories as part of the Two Blue Roses House concert online. We won't be a judge of his musical talent. We'll leave that down to the people at Desert Planet Discs. But just casting our minds back to the release of Return of the Jedi and the novelisation, what did you think of Mr. Caan's work?
I'd say we talked about this recently on Making Tracks. That Empire to Jedi run, I still think it's probably one of my favourite periods being a Star Wars fan, because the anticipation was insane. And the book, like most sort of novelisations back in the day, came out before the film. So I read the book before I saw the film, and I saw the film on pirate video before it came out at the cinema. So I was really early on this one. It's a great book. It's a great book. It's a great read. I think my only criticism of the book at the time was that Star Wars, Splinters, the Han Solo trilogy, and Empire were all released by Sphere, and this was Futura. So it didn't look the same on the shelves. It had that purple spine, and it just didn't look the same. That was a little bugbear for me back in the day, which means absolutely nothing. But no, it's a great novelisation. And James Caan sort of went on. He did the Temple of Doom adaptation. He did Goonies. He did all sorts of stuff, back in the day. I interviewed him for The Insider a few years ago. I think I did a Red 5 with him. And he's a nice guy. He's always been receptive to, whenever we've wanted to speak to him. And I think he enjoys, that part of his career back in the day. And let's say this is a music concert he's doing. He's released a few albums, and thought it was worth sharing with the readers that it might be something they want to listen to.
You're listening to Fantha Tracks. Flip through the galaxy of literature with Canon Fodder hosts Brian Cameron, Matt Booker, Mark Newbold, and Mark Mulcaster.
Count me in.
Spin round the rim with Desert Planet Discs. Your musical journey through the space lanes with your hosts, Carl Bayless and Greg Robertson.
The hottest tunes this side of Mos Eisley. Happy!
Get the latest news, interviews, reviews, and much more on Making Tracks with your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
Like an Ewok battle wagon out of control.
Join hosts Claire Henry and a rotating panel of guest hosts for the podcast that's full of hope. Planet Leia.
I love you. I know.
It's time to head south with the Fantha from Down Under, Adam O'Brien.
Oh, g'day, mate. How you going?
Start your engines with Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold as they lift the hood on starships, airspeeders, swoops, capital ships, and more from across the cosmos. And for everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
The other big news this month was the release of Thrawn Ascendancy, Chaos Rising, the latest novel from Timothy Zahn, focusing on Papa Smurf. Anyone had a chance to have a little read of the novel so far? It's only been out a few days here in the UK. We've had lots of interviews online with Timothy Zahn. We've had more excerpts from the book posted online as well. And to accompany the release over here in the UK, we've had a re-release of the UK paperbacks using new covers that were only previously available in America on the legacy editions of the covers out there.
I'm listening to the audiobook. I'm about an hour left of it, and I've done it. I've got the hardback with the nice blue cover, blue pages, but I haven't actually opened it up yet. But stark contrast in just kind of like the general style compared to the Empire trilogy back in 92. So it's quite interesting that they've re-released that version. and not maybe waited for like the 30th anniversary or something. But it's personally, I think it took me a little bit of time to get into it, I think, but after about the 10th chapter, it was all good, Matt. It's interesting and intriguing. It's just not a very exciting kind of book. It's a lot more kind of there's little bits of action, but there's not a huge amount of action, and it's just that kind of style that like Thrawn is now in these kind of stories.
Yeah, it's definitely setting the groundwork. You can tell it's a trilogy. It's definitely setting the landscape out. Yeah. I mean, I'm fairly new. I know Mark listens to a lot of audiobooks. I've just started. I've just got an Audible account, so I've just listened to the Dr. Aphra audio, which was really good. Went back and got Dooku again, excellent, and now Chaos Rising, and I've enjoyed it. I've not read or heard or listened to the previous 3 Thrawn books, but I've got them all lined up to dig into once I've finished Alphabet Squadron, which I'm nearly finished with as well. But yeah, no, I'm enjoying it. Just to say, the book itself, physically with the blue accented paper, is gorgeous, really, really nice. But I've really enjoyed the audio. But Mark Thompson's brilliant anyway, so he really completely sells it. You know, every voice is different. You know, you listen to it. There's one character, it's basically Jack Nicholson from The Shining. You know, there's another character, it's basically Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. You know, you can tell where there's a helmsman who sounds like Sulu in it briefly. You know, he's sort of picking voices, isn't he? He's picking voices and characters, very recognisable. And I don't think for a second that if they actually made a film of this book or an animated episode of this book, that they would have the accents they've got. He's kind of using the voices and the accents to give additional information to the listener about what kind of character this is. So it says a lot more for Mark Thompson as the guy reading the book than just reading the words. Like I would just read the words. You know, he's giving you even more information by the choice of voice he uses for the characters. It's really clever. So I'm really enjoying it. But yeah, I mean, we've got a full review coming to the site soon of the novel that Ross is writing at the moment, which should be on the site within the next few days. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to the second one.
Poe Dameron, Free Fall's been out from a little while from Alex Segura. He continues to make them rounds online promoting the book. He's been recently talking about Babu Frick and how he's a key part of the story. Has anyone actually picked up Free Fall yet and had a look of it? And what do you think of it? And what do you think of Babu Frick in it?
I've got it, but I've not started reading it yet because I'm still working through other stuff. But I'm looking forward to it. It looks like a lot of fun. So, and it looks like a fairly quick read as well. So I don't think it'll be one of those trawls that sometimes books can be. So, yeah, hopefully by the next episode I'll have got it read. But I like the look of what I've seen.
Yep, same for me. I've got it. It's in the bookcase. I've got the Audible already down. No, it's not from Audible, but I have got a download of it. And it's the next thing that I'm going to be listening to after I finish the Thrawn book.
The third Alphabet Squadron novel has had a title announced. It's going to be called A Victory's Price. And it's had the first blurb. It's landing on our doormats 2nd of March 2021. What do we think of this series so far? What do we hope to get in the conclusion of the trilogy?
I'm currently listening to. I'm halfway through. I was halfway through Alphabet Squadron, and then I stopped because I wanted to listen to Thrawn. So I'm going to pick up the rest of the first book, and I've got Shadowfall lined up to listen to pretty much as soon as I finish Thrawn. So I've enjoyed it so far. I mean, it's bringing this team together and putting the focus on these new characters. It's been good so far. I mean, I'm waiting for that first book to really sort of take off. No pun intended. But I'll be certainly by the time this third book comes out, I'll be well up to speed on it. So, be looking forward to it. Yeah, it's a good idea. It's a good era to investigate because it's definitely a part of the Star Wars timeline that needs a bit of focus. So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. I started Shadowfall, got about 2 chapters into it, but then stopped it for Thrawn and that, which is bad because I normally actually just kind of plow on through the books and then carry on, but I found like with the first one, it took a little while to get into, for me anyway. Like for the second half of the book is a lot more kind of like, there's a lot more going on, and I guess it's because all the first half tends to be kind of like a lot of kind of almost exposition of how the characters get set up and how they make their way to be in the squadron. A few people have kind of compared it to the X-Wing's kind of squadron books and stuff from the mid-90s, which I don't think it's really got the same kind of...
it's not got that vibe, has it?
It hasn't got that vibe. But then, with exception, ironically, of Resistance Reborn, I don't think many of the new canon books kind of have that EU vibe, for, you know, better or for worse. So yeah, I mean, but it's a good addition, and like Mark said, I mean, it's an era that needs fleshing out from both sides, and the fact that I think you kind of get a bit more perspective from the Imperial Remnant as well as the New Republic. It's just going to help kind of like round things off a bit and kind of give a balanced view.
To me, I haven't been as captivated from this series as I kind of hoped for. I was a huge fan of Stackpole's X-Wing novels, and I kind of hoped I wanted to feel a little bit like that reading these. And I just haven't been captivated by it. And I guess maybe that's slightly, with not putting words in any of your mouth, but you both started listening but were able to jump out of it quite easily. And I've kind of felt that with these novels, in that when I pick them up, they're very easy to put down. And that's never a good thing, I don't feel. I like to be really absorbed into a book and just find myself, oh my God, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, what am I doing here still sitting reading this?
Yeah.
I haven't felt this with this series. I don't know why it hasn't connected with me.
No, I mean, because Alexander Freed, he also wrote the first Battlefront book, sorry, a Twilight Company, and I had a similar kind of thing with that. It was a bit of a slog to get through it, and by all rights, I kind of felt like I should be really enjoying this, but I didn't like not enjoy it. But at points, I just found it kind of like, yeah, just difficult. You know, you kind of like, you start flicking through to find out how many pages you've got to the end of a chapter and stuff like that, which I don't tend to do. You know, so it's, I don't know. I mean, I suppose it, you know, that's like you said, it's not to say that he's not a good author at all. It's just maybe it's not landing with.
I think he's quite a technical and quite a heavy author.
Yeah,
that there isn't so much attachment to the characters. He's, you know, it's a very military type novel than it is character driven. That's kind of how I felt about it.
Yeah, you know, you're completely right, and especially with like Twilight Company, because it was kind of like a one and done, and you know, whereas this is a trilogy, so hopefully by the time we get to the third book, and it's always hard to sometimes judge a trilogy based on, you know, the first or even second installments.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens and see what the kind of like the culmination of it is, I guess.
We've mentioned a lot about audiobooks in this show, and Star Wars: The Clone Wars Stories of Light is out on audiobook. We're seeing a lot of people whose voices we know. Part of that, Catherine Tabor, James Arnold Taylor, Corey Burton, Matt Lanter, Sam Witwer are all part of the people reading various chapters for that audiobook. Is that one of the audiobooks you guys have been listening to this month, or is it in your queue to listen to?
It's in my queue.
It's not in mine because it's not an Audible. It's not available on Audible, so I'm going to have to find an alternative route to find it. And I haven't got the book yet either. It's not arrived yet, but I'm certainly looking forward to it when I do get around to it. To hear Whitwell read some of that stuff could be a lot of fun. And like you say, you just said the names. You know, it's all Clone Wars voice actors. So it should be it's an interesting way of doing it. I like the look of it. I'm certainly looking forward to it. But yeah, I think the Whitwell one will be the one that I'll probably gravitate to initially.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I would have thought, and something like this for the audiobook would probably be the bigger appeal. But I mean, I've got the hardback. It's in the bookshelf, but it's it feels a little bit thinner compared to like Shadowfall or even Rise. It's probably about the same size as Rise of Skywalker, maybe. So I don't imagine it's going to be too like long to kind of read it or listen to it.
Is there a particular character that you're looking forward to hearing a little bit more about? Because obviously you guys are big fans of the Clone Wars animation.
Well, because the stories are kind of retellings, aren't they?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
not like nothing that really stands out. I mean, I just listen to it and report back if something jumps out as like being really amazing. I think it's just one of those books. But I know I'm probably going to enjoy listening to or reading, so it doesn't really matter. But I'll just start on page 1 and work my way through to the end.
And the last piece of news this month was the November solicitations for Marvel. Coming up in November, we've got new issues for Star Wars, Darth Vader, Bounty Hunters, and Dr. Aphra, one a week. We've also got 2 collections. We've got a Star Wars Legends Epic Collection, Tales of the Jedi, and we've got Star Wars Dr. Aphra Omnibus Volume 1 in hardcover. I'm particularly looking forward to Tales of the Jedi. I kind of feel it's quite an appropriate release to come out just before we jump into the High Republic in 2021. And it's going to be an interesting comparison to look back at that and what Dark Horse did back in the day, and what direction Marvel and IDW really take in terms of the artwork for the new series. But is there anything in that releases that month that jumps out at you guys?
I'm enjoying the mainline Star Wars title. That's been fun, more than I expected to, actually. So that's got my interest at the moment. And Vader again. I know we talked about it briefly earlier, but Vader's been really quite quirky in a good way. They've gone down some little avenues I didn't expect. This whole Naboo storyline. Kind of when I first heard about it, I thought that feels like a stretch, but actually reading it, it feels very organic. So I've enjoyed that, and Greg Pak's doing a good job on that. I've got to catch up with Bounty Hunters. I so enjoyed the first issue, so I'm ready to sort of pile into the next. I've got the first 4 of those to read. So, and I'm enjoying Aphra, but I think, like you say, right, to go back and have a reread of Tales of the Jedi right now I think would be really cool. I really enjoyed Tales of the Jedi back in the day, and it is back in the day. It's pushing 30 years ago, isn't it? It's early 90s,
really is,
wasn't it?
yeah.
Coming out over the next month, we've got a wide range of releases. On the 15th of September, Fascinating Facts is a kind of non-fiction book aimed towards children. Also that day, Jedi Fallen Order Dark Temple comes out as a collection from Marvel. Darth Vader 5 comes out on the 16th of September, as well as Star Wars Adventures Issue 1, the new ongoing from IDW. Age of Resistance comes out as a collection on the 22nd of September, alongside Star Wars Adventures Volume 10 Driving Force from IDW. The Complete Skywalker Saga is a collection from Little Golden Books of all the film adaptations. Lovely little collection there if you've not picked up those books as they've come out as you've gone along. On the 23rd comes Bounty Hunters Issue 5, alongside the Clone Wars Battle Tales Issue 5 from IDW. And the month of September rounds out with Star Wars Legends Epic Collection, The Empire Volume 6. And we have, for fans of people who fold paper, Star Wars Origami number 2, The Fold Awakens. Clever title. And on the 30th of September, Dr. Aphra Issue 4. Anything that's coming out in the next month that grabs your attention?
Yeah, the Little Golden Books collection for me. I love them. I think they're awesome. And I wish what they should have done, and they won't, but what they should have done was a special, collection only version of Rogue One. I would love to see a Little Golden Book try and tackle Rogue One.
How do we explain that? Yeah,
I don't know. I just want to see it.
Well, I suppose just Cassian and Jin just walk off into the sunset, which just
which is exploding.
Yes.
Apocalypse a bit later.
Yeah.
Not now. A bit later.
I mean, for me, Darth Vader 7, I think. I mean, like Mark said, actually, the Darth Vader series is interesting. And I think actually what's helped it in some respects is the two kind of like Queen's Peril and Queen's Shadow books, which if you've read those, they just kind of flesh out the handmaiden characters a bit. So, just then seeing them.
Do they tie in though, or is it just?
Well, Tonra's in there as well. So Tonra is one of the security guards. So I mean, they tie in there as much as like it's cameos, but at least you're kind of a little bit more understanding and sympathetic to like who they are, and also why the hell they still kind of care. I think about like because they kind of come under this kind of like kind of group called the Amidalians, who kind of I don't say worship, but kind of
protect a legacy, don't they? Really,
protect a legacy. Yeah, that's a good term. Yeah, thank you. So it's, I mean, I think it's just it's a good example of where one Star Wars tie-in just helps to enforce another, but not in a way where you feel like, oh my god, I have to read this.
For me, I'm looking forward to picking up Fallen Order. I never read the comic series as it came out, even though I picked it up.
Can I just say, having a look at the Amazon listing of Star Wars Legends Epic Collection Tales of the Jedi Volume 1, it's all the later stuff. So it's Dawn of the Jedi, Force Storm, Dawn of the Jedi, Prisoner of Bogan, and Dawn of the Jedi, Force War. So it's all that really proto Tales of the Jedi stuff from like 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. So it's kind of like fairly modern stuff. I think it came out
2012, 2013.
Yeah. So it's unfortunately it doesn't sound like it's this volume's going to cover like
they're doing it chronologically then, because that's really is the earliest stuff.
Yeah, that is the first stuff. Yeah.
This month, our big review is the Vader ongoing series from Marvel. It joins Vader at an interesting point in his life where the series starts just after The Empire Strikes Back, where Vader's revealed to Luke that he's his father. So it's an interesting psychological part of Vader's storyline to see what his thinking is at that time, and after Luke would rather get his hand chopped off than join him, what Vader's take is on the history there with Luke and what his next steps are going to be and what his plans are. You guys have all had a chance to read Vader so far. What's your take on the overall?
I'm really enjoying it. It's because, obviously so much happens in Empire and it affects Vader, I think, equally, if not more than it affects Luke, really. I mean, Luke's physically altered by it, but he doesn't have any resolution to what he learns until Yoda confirms it in Jedi, really. But Vader knows the truth all along. So it feels like it's an area of the storyline from Vader's point of view that we've not really dived into, and it seems to have kind of thrown him into a bit of a quandary, really. Normally he's so self-assured and one vision about everything, a bit of a bulldozer. He's the brute guy in Star Wars, and the Empire is a bit more nuanced to him. But like so many of the characters, by the time you get to Jedi, they've had the world turned upside down, and Vader kind of has as well. It's an interesting angle to come at, and I think Greg Pak's doing a really good job. And like we just talked about a few minutes ago, I've just read issue 4. Issue 5 is out next week, I think, as we speak, and they're on Naboo. And it didn't feel like a place you think you would go. Like the main Star Wars title very quickly took them to Tatooine, which, whilst I'm very much enjoying the main title, it felt way too soon to go to Tatooine. We're like literally, it actually overlaps with the end of Empire. Before Luke gets his mechanical hand, apparently Lando's gone to Tatooine and had this whole exchange with Jabba, and all these things have happened, and it just felt really weird. Didn't sit quite right. Enjoyable, but just thought, no, that didn't happen. That makes sense. Because it goes so far against what you kind of knew in the old sort of EU as was. But this, going back to Naboo, because it feels so uniquely prequel trilogy, and of course Anakin and Padme's story is the prequel trilogy, and Vader is Anakin, so it all ties up. I've just really enjoyed it. You saw Captain Typho, you saw all the handmaidens, like Mark mentioned earlier, from the earlier films. You see Rick Oley. There's all these familiar characters on this planet we know so well from the prequels. And then there's Anakin, but it's not Anakin, it's Darth Vader. It's just, I've really enjoyed it, and I'm itching to read the next issue. Really good. And the artwork's gorgeous, by the way.
Yeah, the artwork is lovely. Yeah, I'm the same. It's I've always kind of wanted to go back to Naboo, because it's one of those things that, like, you know, after Revenge of the Sith, you know, we don't really see a huge amount of it again, and so it's just nice to go back. But also, you know, it starts to tie some loose ends together for some of these characters that we did meet in the prequels. And they do a really good way of, like, in issue 4, of just kind of having these flashback moments. And so, you know, all these kind of things obviously are starting to really kind of weigh on Vader and affect him. So it's a really curious kind of storyline. And I think also, because it just felt like, you know, since the new Marvel series started, you know, we've been in that A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back era. It's nice to just move on, because it just feels like you know, it got to a point where it was so overpopulated. It's nice to move on, and also, like, with Vader, it's kind of like, you know, like Mark said, you kind of added a bit more nuance to the character, because we kind of see the fragility of him from after Revenge of the Sith. And then we kind of get that kind of, like, you know, that marauding monster through Rogue One and A New Hope and that era. So now we've kind of got that kind of, like, fragile kind of ness back, but on a more emotional sense rather than a kind of like a physical sense.
Yeah. I mean, because all these things have happened. And also, it's also weird because you are back on Naboo, and it's that place we've never sort of been back to since, you know, what, 15 years on, other than the Clone Wars, of course. But even chronologically, we've not really been back. Not that I'm aware of, anyway. Nothing that I've seen. But yeah, it just putting the two together really works. And like Mark says, you know, we've got past that Star Wars Jedi Empire era, and we've had Empire happen, and it's the 40th anniversary, so they've timed that beautifully. You know, that worked out well. And now we're in that run that I said earlier I love so much, that Empire to Jedi run. And so far, you know, and all the books are in that era as well. Afra's in that era, so Star Wars and they're all in that era. So it's nice that they're all sort of running these parallel lines, and I'm sure there's crossovers coming. There's got to be. But yeah, it's really impressive. It's the one I was looking forward to the most when it got announced at New York Comic Con, and I just think I think back to when would it be, 2006 or 7? Joe Caroni did that beautiful painting of Vader sitting in the meditation chamber, and above him is that image of Padme. You know, and he's obviously thinking about her like he would, you know, as much as he could. And I just think Greg Pak must have seen that picture and thought, there's something in that. There's more stories to tell from that. You know, almost like the picture of Vader holding 3PO's head in, you know, way back when. It's that sort of logic of, he has got this other life and this other thing, you know, all the things that happened to him and all the life he lived. It's all there. And it's still there inside Vader, but you kind of disassociate the two characters. Well, this is nicely pulling them all together. It's really good.
What's your thoughts, Matt?
I've only managed to read the first two so far, because the other two are still sat in my shop and I forgot I hadn't taken them home. But the first two, really enjoyed it. It's a very different angle on Vader to the previous Vader series we've had, and it's somebody else's very different take on the character, which I like exploring different angles of it. So I'm enjoying it. For
me, I like the twists in it. You know, they kind of implied that Padme was there, and they twisted it, and it was Sabe. The journey to Naboo, and there's a twist again where you've got this group calling themselves the Amidalans, and they actually know that Vader was there when Padme died, but yet they don't know Vader's Anakin. I like that. I like the way that Greg Pak's been sort of taking the story. I feel that he's executed it far too quick. So they go to Tatooine, and it should have been such a bigger thing, but it was over so quick. And they went to Naboo, and it should have been such a bigger thing. But again, I felt that they went slightly too quick on that. That said, I like the fact that they've gone to Naboo. Less happy about the Tatooine side of it. Didn't feel that sat right with the overall arc from the films. The Naboo stuff felt right. The art, I absolutely loved. Raphael Ienko, Niraj Menon on the colours. I loved it, the way that they played the flashbacks in a slightly different colour. I loved the studies of the prequel characters. I thought absolutely gorgeous, perfect representations of them. Brilliant looking back at a lot of the prequel stuff, from the Gungan pods in the sea. I don't know what the proper name for them is. I'm going to call them a Gungan pod.
The bongos.
No, the village bubbles, the underwater village. You know, the
pod.
Otogunga.
Yeah, but they didn't go there. They went into just a single one.
Yeah.
In issue 3. So whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Pods will do. I love seeing a colo clawfish. That was beautifully done. A little bit over the top and unnecessary in the overall story, but why not? If you're going underwater in Naboo, throw one in. Pretty much, I don't know why there's such a thing as underwater travel in Naboo, because anytime someone travels underwater in Naboo, they encounter one. So it seems odd that they keep doing it. Anyway, I thought the colour work throughout was beautiful. The tones was perfect, especially because Vader's difficult, because obviously you can't change up Vader. It's a black outfit. So, but it's the way that they've hit the light on the character and some of the panels is just beautiful. Loved that. And so there's so much to love in there. So whilst it's got faults, and I think pacing is probably the biggest thing, I loved the combinations of everything, and there were so much positive elements in it that the negatives kind of washed itself away. And I kind of felt like they fixed some of them as well, like especially in the Padme twist, that I initially thought, look, Padme's looking far too young. But as the series has progressed, they've kind of aged Sabe.
Yeah.
And I guess what they were trying to do was faux Padme had to look how Padme looked. And then when they've kind of revealed the twist, they've kind of gone back to making Sabe look like how she does now.
Yeah.
Which I guess is just an art thing rather than a story thing. I thought that was especially true of the cover art in issue 2, when they had the Padme cover. It was like a teenage Padme. It seemed wrong, but as I say, because everything else has been so good, you let that things pass. And the one thing that jumps from mind was there was like a full page panel of Vader on Naboo with sort of the lush green landscapes in the background, and then the really bright colours of the wildlife and the flowers, and you've got Vader in this kind of rich black in it, and it was just wonderful. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. You could have taken that single panel and blown that up as a poster and it would look lovely.
No, totally agree. No, I was going to say, totally agree with that. It's putting those two, Vader's like this nightmare character. You get to the end of Revenge of the Sith and all the beauty and all the colour and all the vivid, aspects of Star Wars and the galaxy have been bled out into grey and black and sort of red. It's very monochrome at the end of Revenge of the Sith, and Vader's a big part of that, isn't he? With the Emperor and, the turning to ash, literally, on the shores of Mustafar. It's just quite horrendous. And so to pitch that against that scene in Attack of the Clones when they're by the waterfall, having the picnic and all that stuff, and all these little flashbacks he keeps having to Padme then and thinking of her then. And you said about the covers, I think from a stylistic point of view, you're right, that's not how Sabe would look or Padme would have looked at this point, with so many years on. But I think it's almost how Vader would see her in his head, because that's how she remembers him. It's almost like the Hayden Force Ghost turning up at the end of Jedi. That's how Anakin looked before he became Darth, and even when he was before the armor, that's how he looked. He never looked like Sebastian Shaw, even though we love that. So I just think it's one of those, how he sees it, how he perceives it himself. So I'm loving it, like, for every reason you've just said. All these little moments are just picture perfect.
I like like you guys have mentioned, like where they've taken like a prequel or a original trilogy moment and sort of contrasted it to the current plot going on in the comic as well. There's a lot of parallels there that I've enjoyed as well. It's been very cleverly written and thought out as to where they're going to go. And my only criticism is slow it down, let us enjoy it even more. Thanks for listening to this month's Canon Fodder. If you want to be part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit panthertracks.com and download the Panthertracks app to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@panthertracks.com. And remember to comment, like, share and subscribe on all our social medias at Panthertracks. Leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcaster or smart speaker of choice.
Coming up next on Panther Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.